and welcome to today's episode of First Contact. Now, I'm absolutely thrilled to have on the show today Stephen and Evan Strong, who are the original historians. And I have to give a little bit of backstory here. So Stephen, Evan, and I met in Uluru in 2020. It was a really pivotal event, very transformational. I think we fully shifted entire timelines and all sorts of crazy stuff happened. So fast forward to today in 2024, and I get to have them on the show. It's an absolute honor to have you both here with me today. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you for letting us come on. Yeah,
of course. And I know you guys have some amazing things to share today. So just before we get into that, give us in about a minute or two a little bit of your backstory of how you actually started in this. And you know, it's not every day people wake up and go, oh, you know what, I think I'm going to investigate ET. So what was that starting point for you guys?
For me, the starting point was I was a teacher, both in high school and in primary. And I was involved with a lady called Linda Burney in writing the Aboriginal Studies course for senior schools, which started off brilliantly. And about, probably 15 years ago, I was asked to come back to do a review. And I realised they'd taken that course and turned it into a whitefellow history course, and everyone was using to score high points for their entry into university. And it dawned on me that what had happened, and since I've got involved in this, a lot of the parents were showing me things that didn't get into what we'd actually just put in. And it started to dawn on me that the whole of this history that we were teaching, not only was it badly taught, it was incorrect. And at that review, I said at the time, most of the stuff you're saying is wrong. I've spoken to elders and that's not what happened. And we had a major disagreement about that. I went back to Moree and resigned the next day, and decided we'd start writing about it. So that's how we got involved in that. And what then happened was we wrote some books, and we basically did a comparison between Gnosticism and the dreaming. And then some elders from the Raminjeri called us down, or called me down first up, Evan went later, and gave a ceremony. And Kano Walker was the main person. He's probably the most important Otway elder in this country. And then he gave us a brief and told us what we were to do. And from that point on, every time we did something new, we would send that work off to Kano first. He'd approve it. And once it was approved, we'd release it. And it became a gradual process from there. So I've got to thank the Department of Education for being ignorant and refusing to change from what they were going to do, because if they hadn't changed, I'd still be teaching. So that's how I got involved.
My background was a little bit different, well, other than father-son connection. And I went to university and was doing psychology, and just as a whim, I had like a spare major. So I, at my local university, managed to do an anthropology, had a little bit of archaeology, a few different things in it. And I just did that because I was interested in it, right? And ended up getting pretty good marks in it. And I'm like, well, great. I don't think I'll end up doing anything with that. But anyway, it's there. And as it turns out, that's what I use now. But and I think the Gnostic to the dreaming connection was quite unique back then. So we even got published by the University Press of America for the first 3 books. But then when we started talking about the stuff up,
they didn't want to touch it.
We had to then find another way to get our books out, because they were not keen to do that. We're going back to the mid noughties here, like 2005, 6, 7, so going back a little bit of time. And it was funny when we had started the history stuff and the archaeology, our elders kind of went, oh, you're going to start talking about these ones. And we went, no, we're not. Like, that's too hard. This is hard enough doing alternative archaeology. Why would we talk about that stuff? And they just smiled and went, oh, you're going to talk about it? And within, was it a week?
A week after, because he rang me up and said, you're going to start talking about the link with up there, and you're going to do astronomical sites. And I said, mate, I can't even find the Southern Cross. I don't know where it is. I know it's up there somewhere. It was 2 days later. It was 2 days later.
I was trying to remember.
2 days later, after they rang up and said, you'll be starting very soon, we had the senior park ranger from the Snowy Mountains in Brisbane Waters ring up and say, I want to take you to some major rock arrangements that relate to the, I think the first one related to the conjunction of 5 planets that happens every about 300 years, and something else upstairs. So we started from there, and we've basically gone all over Australia. And what we do is we do not barge onto country. We wait for an elder to invite us to come onto country. We don't chase people. They come to us and ask us, would you come up to, whether it's West Australia, whether it's Queensland, it doesn't matter. We just go where we're told.
And what we've learned over the years is a lot of those sacred sites we get invited to always have an up there connection.
No. Kano actually told us once, if we go to a site and they cannot identify a constellation or star that relates to that site, walk away, because they're lying.
And of course, there's one dreaming story that's quite universal. It talks about the Seven Sisters of Pleiades and Orion chasing them. So yeah, that's a pretty universal.
It's the only dreaming story that's all shared by every tribe in Australia.
Yeah.
So when you start to do this and you start to see that constant connection with the Pleiades, the constant connection with the all the stars up there, me telling them at the start we weren't going to talk about that became a wish list that did never get fulfilled.
No wonder they laughed at us when we said, "Hi, we don't want to do that."
I know, just shook their heads and said, "You'll do what you're told." So that's how we do it. Yeah.
Like to separate the two, right? I mean, from what I know, I had the pleasure of interacting with Noel Nannup here in West Australia on a handful of occasions, and they did a bit of a series for us. This was back in the day when I was doing my Steiner teacher training, so I have a bit of that teaching background as well. So I was doing my Steiner teaching course, and we met with Noel Nannup on a handful of occasions, and he shared us this story, the West Australian version of the Seven Sisters. And yeah, I found it very interesting because, you know, going into a teacher training course, the last thing I expected was to be learning about the Pleiadians, you know, from Indigenous history. And I thought, okay, well, that's really interesting. And I have seen that is across the board one of the more universal stories. And I'm curious as to why that is and what the significance of that might be.
Well, the reason is very simply that if you look at the story of the Seven Sisters, and you've got to remember, because it's a female story, we only know the bare bones of it because it's a story that's much deeper amongst the women and it's their business. But what you will find, I mean, Kano gave us a story about one of the rocks, which we'll talk about later, about them coming here the first time. They believe, and I remember one elder, Uncle Jerry, when he used to ring me up, he never said goodbye. He would always say the same thing each time. He always finished by saying, my grandmother told me the Pleiadians are our brothers, our sisters, and they're our kin. And then he'd hang up. So it's something that's ingrained into old way teaching at every possible level. It's part of their history. It's part of their truth. And, of course, mainstream academia, they understand that the Seven Sisters goes everywhere, but they don't follow that through to its logical conclusion.
You can find academic papers written about the Pleiades and everything. Yeah. And they'll even mention, they say that they're countrymen or country people of the sky and our cousins and things like that. But they don't follow it through going, Well,
you know, there was, in Greece, they did follow it through and they made a very valid point, the archaeologists in Greece. They said the Seven Sisters from the Pleiades, if you look up there today, you'll see 6. You will not see 7. The 7 were visible about 100,000 years ago. And since that time, they have not been visible. And they said, well, that means this story could be 100. Oh, no, it can't be. Sorry, we'll have to stop about it. Because it asked all sorts of questions. 100,000 years ago, no, we weren't doing things like that. Yes, we were. So it's an uncomfortable truth that mainstream decide the best way is to acknowledge it because they don't have a choice.
Yeah.
And then run away from it, and which is what they do.
Right. That's so fascinating. I could probably ask 100 more questions just on that one topic, but I know you guys want to share some of your more recent research with us today as well. So for anyone who has not come across Stephen and Evan Strong before, if you want to catch up on some of the work they do, obviously go to their website, you can find them everywhere, Google them. But today, what I want to go into is some of your new empirical research that you have.
Okay.
That supposedly is very conclusive, and I'm very intrigued as to what you might have there.
Well, it is conclusive because I can tell you since we've stumbled onto 2 sites, the Standing Stone site, and particularly the site with the skulls we're going to talk about, the government have been actively trying on many occasions, and I've got a file that is this thick of official letters that Evan stores away, where the government have threatened to put me in jail. And it's been constant. I've had to answer 43 questions. I've had to do this time after time after time. And I think about a year and a half ago, I got an official warning from the government. And the warning went something like this: we have more than enough evidence to take you to court to put you in jail. And to begin with, they were going to fine me, I think it was $250,000 to $750,000 6 months to 3 years. In the end, it was $1 million, 3 years or more. So it grew as we went along. And what they said was, we have enough evidence, but at this time, we've decided not to actually take you to court, but we reserve the right at any time in the future to do so. So that's where it was left at that particular time. Now, the reason is because the evidence we found was so non-contradictory. There's no way you can say it's anything other than. So what actually happened is I was called onto the site, and Evan, if you could put up a couple of pictures, and would you start with that one, please? Okay, and Evan's going to put a picture up. And I was called onto the site, and I went down to this site, and there in front of me were two skulls, and you're looking at one of them now, which was actually laying on the surface, because I did not dig underneath because I'm not allowed to. And I've got to be very careful because the government is so keen to put me in jail. But when I looked at that skull, there's a few things that dawned on me immediately. Number one, where's the forehead? Now, Isha, as you know, we all have a forehead. You've seen people walking down the streets, and you've never seen anyone walking down the street looking like that.
That picture is up, isn't it?
Yeah, I can see.
Good. Okay. Sure. Right. So there I am with my ruler, because I wasn't going to dig around that with anything metal. I didn't want to damage it. And I put 12 rocks around it before we started. So I gave it ceremony. And I was with two elders who also gave this ceremony. We did this whole way. And as I picked that up and looked at that skull, there were things that still stood out. Number one, the eyes are massive. 46% larger than ours. Number two, if you look at that bit that's sticking out near the top there, that's the nose. Now, this part here, the depression between our two eyebrows goes in. This sticks out. And I'm thinking, well, that ain't a normal nose. Then I looked at the eyes and said, they're not normal eyes. And then I looked at the forehead and said, well, there isn't one. And there isn't. There's no forehead there. And I looked at that and thought, well, we've got a problem here, ladies and gentlemen, because there's no hominid on the planet. Now, some people might think, oh, that looks a bit like Lucy, one of those early hominids that had no brain. Well, no, that's not the case. Could you find another picture from there, please, Evan? And let's see if we can find one with the full skull. No, not that one. Keep going.
All right,
Evan will have to go back and find it for a sec. But what we might do is, while he's doing that, I might hold one up while he's looking for it. And what I'm going to show you now is a reconstructed skull. And this is what it actually looks like. And I'm looking right now for the right picture, which you don't seem to have. Oh, that one over there.
Oh, that one. Okay.
Thank you. He's going to put it up first and we'll come back here. Now, that's what's behind the forehead. Now, can you see what happens at the back there? It continues going back, and at the very back, it's 18 centimetres across. Our skull is 13 centimetres across at its widest point. This continues going back like a flask. And at the back, it turns out that its brain size, we're about 1,300 cc. This is somewhere between 17 to 1,800. Now, you compare that to our skull, and the first thing you're going to say was, has Homo sapien ever been more than 1,300? No. This is supposed to be as big as we ever got. So when you look at that skull sitting in the ground there in Australia, you see that the skull runs backwards. And now I'm going to make a point here, and it's a very important point, Isha. Some people say, oh, it's a mutated Homo sapien. We found 4 of these. One was found in South Australia in the desert. 2 were found near the Murray River, and 1 was found on the coast in Victoria. So they're not a mutation in one place because they're 4 different tribal areas. But the big issue is that skull being 17 centimetres wide at the back means that if you may be aware of this, you might have heard occasionally when women give birth, they want you to dilate to 10 centimetres, right, to get the baby through. There is no way on this planet any woman can dilate to 15 centimetres to get this baby through. It will not happen. Therefore, it is impossible for any Homo sapien or any hominid to give birth to this being. That was clearly evident to me when I looked at that. So we've got an issue with that. And if you can come back for a sec, Evan, I'll show them one of this is made up. This is not that one, because that one was in our site, which the government have closed down, and I got many letters threatening to put me in jail for even going there, and that's been an ongoing process. But this is a reconstructed skull of a different skull that was found elsewhere and was given to us by an academic. And now you can see how the head runs backwards. And you can see, because I'm hiding it from the normal position, there's the face there, it's got a completely different flat face, flatter than ours. But it runs back forever. Now, on the back of this one, it gets worse. This particular one, not that one, because that one had 3 sutures. Because as you would know, when a baby is born, the sutures aren't complete. You've got to be very careful on the top of the head. This has no sutures. So we've run into 2 of these beings with no forehead. The first one had 3 sutures. This has none. I would assume this is older. Okay, I think this goes back further. And the other one is a combination of perhaps us and them, like the 7 sisters from the Pleiades talks about. Because who landed on this place? Women. Who give birth to babies? Women, not men. That's why it's the 7 sisters. So what we've got here at that particular site, and if you could go back to the other one that was with them, please, Evan, there is a second skull. And Evan's going to show you a picture there. That one will do. He's going to show you a picture of the 2 of them together. And you can see the one I'm talking about there, the one you've just looked at with the flask-shaped skull, and you can see the sutures running across. But see the other one, no sutures. And I was told about this, no sutures. But if you look at one part of it, it is incredibly thick, 15 millimetres. We are 6 to 3. That one, the one with the suture, was 6, and they were next to each other, buried next to each other. But at the back of this one, there's a square knob, 1.5 centimetres by 1.5 centimetres. And I didn't know until we went to see the academic who gave us the bones for this one, that is a standard part of Neanderthal. Now, Neanderthals weren't supposed to be in Australia, but there they are. So you've got 2 burials there. One of a Neanderthal, the one with a thick skull of 15 centimetres, which is the thickest skull found in Australia, but no sutures, which means it's not a hominid, because all hominids have sutures. You've got to remember Lucy, found 3.5 million years ago, had a brain size of 600 cc. How did it grow? Because the sutures mean that the skull can get bigger. All primates, all monkeys, all gorillas have a sagittal keel, and they can never make their skull larger, which is strange because we're supposed to come from chimps and they don't have sutures. That's a different problem. We won't walk about that one for too long. So what we found at that particular place were 2 beings. One had sutures, but had a head nothing like ours, and the other one, which was much thicker, and its brain size was about 1,700 cc again, had no sutures. But when we go to this second site, this one has no sutures whatsoever. So what do we have here? We have a being that is not like us, and there's a remade a skull of that. It was made by someone else. And by the way, the person who put this together worked for the Australian Museum, and their job was to make skulls. So this wasn't made by someone that came down there, walked around the corner and said, I'll do this for you. Now, when you put the 2 of them together, which Evan's doing now, the gentleman who made the complete skull, this was done by the academic from Sydney, at the Australian Museum, he didn't get the forehead quite right. And I don't blame him for that, because he works for Hollywood. What did he make the faces for?
Alien and
Predator.
The Predator film.
Yeah, he does that for a living, right? And he did the full skull. And as you see, when you look at the two together, the nose shape is completely different. The forehead is completely different.
Eyes are different.
The eyes are different. The cheekbone is different. And you know what the most important part is? It's not the skull. When I was on site, before we were kicked off forever and no one's allowed to go back, I picked up two bones. I picked up the first bone here, which I picked up a femur bone, which is the bone that goes from your hip to your knee. And I placed it next to mine and said, look, it's a perfect match. I said, this being must be 5'10". Then leave that one for later. Okay, we'll come to that next. Then I picked up the humerus bone, which is the bone that goes from your shoulder down to your elbow, and we call it the funny bone when you bang it. Remember that? It comes from the word humerus. That's why they called it the funny bone. And here's the trick. When I put it against my bone here, my head, it went down to here, but there was no elbow. And I measured it, and it was 44 from there to where it was broken, which means it had to be 48 at least. Our bones, our humerus bone, is from 28 to 31. The basketballer might have 31. If a basketballer had 48, man, he'd just stand at the hoop and reach up and put it in. He wouldn't need to jump. His arm would be that long. By the way, a gibbon goes to 34. That is 48 at least. And I asked myself, what have I got here? I've got a being with massive eyes that you could not come out during the daytime. And now I've got a bone that's much longer than a gibbon, but it was no thicker than 1 inch. And I asked myself, now this bone I've got, the biggest bone I've ever seen, the biggest arm ever, it's useless. It can't do anything. It's in our gravity, it's just not going to function. It's too long and it would not do anything. Just swinging the arm. You couldn't play tennis with it or play cricket with it. It just wouldn't work. And it dawned on me, if I halved the gravity and made it a much darker planet, it would be fine. But on this planet, it wouldn't be. So that's the problem with that. So we've got the first one I worked on. The one I'm showing you now, an academic, I won't say which university he comes from, because he was going to lose his job while he hung on to this, because they didn't like him holding it and talk, because he was showing his students, wasn't he?
Yep.
They contacted us and said, this is what our lecturer's showing us. And we contacted him and he gave us the skull. He gave us the whole thing. He said, mate, if I keep this much longer, I'm going to lose my job. They're hassling me. And they actually sent it to the government, and the government said they looked at the pictures. They didn't bother to go and even look at it. And they said, oh, no, it's a Homo sapien. I'm telling you now, if you saw this person walking down the street, you'd walk on the other side of the street. He ain't a Homo sapien. So we found those two. We've been in incredible trouble with the government ever since. I've got my own personal ASIO agent since 2015, didn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And by the way, he watches everything we do. Hello. I know what town you live in. I know all about you. Okay, that's all because of this. You see, if this gets out, and we've got these skulls all over the place, and Evan's going to put up another one now, if you wouldn't mind. Please,
That is up, yeah.
That one's up at the moment. And that was a different one. And notice it's got no fold again. It's got the eyebrows sticking out this way, the nose up the top, the whole thing. There are 4 of them all over Australia. And we actually arranged a dig with the university, didn't we?
We did.
We did. And it was fully funded. And the day before they left, somebody stepped in and called the whole thing off. And that skull still sits in the middle of the desert in South Australia. And we know the coordinates, don't we, Evan?
Mm-hmm.
But we're not allowed to go there. And if we do, I go to jail. I'm not allowed to take these skulls out of my house. If I take them and get analysed, I go to jail. That's been made clear. And they're just basically hoping it'll go away. So when we talk about empirical evidence about beings coming here, well, I'm not looking up in the sky for evidence. I'm looking in the ground. And in Australia, there are 4 of these beings that are completely different from anything on this planet. They are not hominids. They are not anything. They're not Neanderthal. They're not Denisovan. They are something completely different again. And you know what? All I have to do is to go to the original history, and we hear a story about the 7 sisters from the Pleiades, and it becomes easy. All I have to do is ask my elders, and they told me the same thing each time. Of course they were here. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we talk about empirical evidence, we have a bucket load of that sort of evidence. And that's why the government is so keen to see us quiet. And by the way, we've had PhDs written about us as pseudo-archaeologists, and we've read them, and there is a standard, a practice to deal with us, and that is they are not to acknowledge us and they're not to talk about us, and if they do talk about us, they'll be thrown off websites. They will not get a job. So the way to deal with this is to say, look the other way and don't talk about it. So that is part of the evidence we have. But there's more, because that's partially the stuff that's been found, but there's more that's been found. And I'm going to talk about two.
First,
Sorry?
I
Yeah.
just have to ask first. So you found all of this, these skulls, and of course you have to rule out, any obvious things like it's not an animal, it's not, an old sort of chimpanzee or anything like that, right? So once you rule all of that out, one, have any of the pieces been at least carbon dated for age? And two, do you have, I mean, when we spoke sort of, off camera earlier, you mentioned that one of your pieces had been analyzed. I'm curious as to what level of analysis has been done on any of the stuff that you found that might have like a really distinctive proof of materials that are not from this world.
Yeah, because look, honestly, when we go, we always use science, okay? When I talk about
the skulls, and we had someone ready to do everything.
We had a guy that worked with Chris Stringer, who's considered the top archaeologist in the world. One of his proteges was working in a university, and I took this skull. It wasn't made up at the time. At that stage, I just took the pieces, and you can see the different. This is not the original pieces, by the way. I took it into his office, and I opened the box, and I said, "What do you think of that?" And he looked at it, and he said, "My God." He said, "What is it?" I said, "Well, you tell me." He said, "I haven't got a clue." I said, "But hang on, didn't you write a paper saying that Homo sapiens came to Australia and only Homo sapiens have been in Australia ever since?" He said, "I did, but it's wrong." I said, "Because we got 4 of these." He said, "I don't know what it is." And by the way, he was keen, very keen, wasn't he? He wanted to work with it. I mean, it's obvious, man. An archaeologist wants to work with this for sure. And he wanted to do it. He knows it. He saw it. And just like this, when we said we had a group going out to pick up another one, that university, and I'm even going to name the university, it's Southern Cross University up near Lismore, was instructed under no conditions are they allowed to look at this or go any further with it. And he rang me up and he told me, "We've been black. Mate, if we touch this, we're gone. We're not allowed to do it." So the answer is yes. I have shown it to probably the best archaeologist in this country. By the way, you can't carbon date bones, but you can use what's called optically stimulated luminescence. And he's the only person in Australia who has a machine, hasn't he, Evan?
Yep.
He's got the machine that can date it. And we're talking about dates. He said 60,000, forget it. He said, that's going back, way back. I can tell you that now. I don't know what it is. And then he was told he's not to look at it. So no, the government has blocked every avenue. What I've said is I want to do science. I want one of these 8 pieces of skull here analysed and the rest taken back on the country. And I've told the government, and they know that. We've been in constant contact with them, believe me, for years. They won't do it because it was analysed. It would actually destroy everything. It would destroy the history we've got of humanity and the fact that we're not alone. So, no, it's been blocked at every level.
We do have other artefacts that have been analysed.
Yes, we do have some analysis for you where it was done properly. And in this case, one of the two I'm going to talk about was done by Southern Cross University, and it was done by a laboratory there that hires 130 scientists. There's very few in Australia that have that many scientists working in one place. And who did it? His name is Graham Lancaster. I played tennis with him last night.
Right.
He did it as a favour. He runs the whole damn thing. And we had a piece of metal that was found at Carryong, and he looked at it once and he said, "Mate, what is that?" I said, "Well, it's a piece of metal." He said, "There's something wrong with this metal." He said, "Can we cut a little bit off?" And I said, "Well, I've got to ask Arnie Minnie Mace because she gave it to us. And I've given it back to her. And Evan's going to get up a picture of it, aren't you, Evan?" Right? I said, "I'll ask for permission." And I did. And she gave us permission. There it is. He's going to put it up now. There it is. Okay. And if you look at it very carefully, you'll see a round piece there that was a clasp. And it was a complete clasp. And Auntie Minnie Mace's daughter wore it to a doof once, banged into something, and it broke and came off. Now, we had it analysed, and it came up at 73% aluminium, 3% copper, and 24% not on the earthly periodic table. They could not identify it. But he did tell me one thing. He said, if you could remake that, you would make billions upon billions of dollars. And I said, why, Graham? He said, because that aluminium, we could not cut into this with anything except the most powerful drill we have, a tungsten tip drill, and it took us quite some time. It's not on that one because it wasn't cut then. And they cut a little shard off the back there. And he told me, we don't know what it is, but he said 24%, that's 1/4 of this thing, has made this the strongest metal we've ever seen. Now think about this is aluminium. We could make it the strongest metal ever by adding this compound in. He said, what is it? I said, I don't know, mate. But there was one other clue. We did some research on this and we found out that alloys, ones that have aluminium and copper, are around. And today they put in around about 12% copper. The last time they put 2 to 4% in to any type of aluminium alloy was over 3,000 years ago. And someone said it's recent. Well, it can't be.
Someone told me they thought it was a melted Coke can.
A Coke can.
And it melted in
And that's what they demanded. That's what it was. And I'm thinking, well, it was a class there to begin with, mate. So they melted the Coke can, then wore it. But secondly, I'm told by one of the top scientists in Australia that this is the hardest thing he's ever seen, and it's aluminium. And that's a contradiction in terms. Now, that is one piece of metal that was found at Carrion. Now, I'm going to show you another piece I'm going to hold up now.
Just get the
readout for that one, if you could.
Yep.
This was analysed by a different machine. Now, this machine is electronic. There's only 2 in Australia, and it's worth a lot of money, okay? And these guys do it for free. Because Roz, the person who brought all these rocks and stuff, she got to know them well and they do it for free. And I went there recently and got some other stuff analysed, which I won't talk about today. This thing here.
Yeah, just want to have a closer look at that.
Okay, I'll hold it up to you.
It looks like a ring, is it? Is it jewellery?
It's a ring. And notice how my finger fits in there and there's no room left over? I'll put 2 fingers in there. I can put 4 in there. It was found in the grounds of Angkor Wat. Okay, as was this ring. Mm-hmm. Now, this ring is unusual. Well, to be honest, they all are because these rings were not made for our fingers. That's pretty clear, isn't it? Right. Now, Evans put up the readout of what was found when we got that particular ring, and we'll have a look at it now. It's got a little bit of silver. It's got platinum, palladium, rhodium, ruthenium, cadmium, and gallium. And then 41.17% iron. But when you add all those numbers up, because every readout we've got comes up to exactly 100%, there's 41.8% not on the table. And we tried it again and it came out the same way. So here's another one. The last one was 24%. This has gone up to 41%. Now, this has been broken 3 times. It is so fragile. It's been stuck together with super glue. And one time it was broken, I found out that underneath here, there's like a silver cord that's not attached to the coat. That green coat you see is all those IUN things together. Underneath, it's part iron and 41.8% something that's not on the periodic table. Now, what is most amazing about this particular ring is not even that metal that doesn't come from here. It's the gallium. Can you see the gallium is 6.89%? Now, Isha, are you familiar with gallium?
A little bit. I mean, I know of it.
Right. It's a byproduct. And it's a byproduct from aluminium and steel. And it's a byproduct when you melt aluminium and steel at around 3,000 degrees Celsius. When in Angkor Wat did they have ovens that could go to 3,000 degrees Celsius? The scientists will tell you, and the academics and the archaeologists will say never. Well, I'm sorry, they did. Now, what's important about gallium is when you do melt it, you get 0.1, 0.2. This is 6.89. It's the third largest metal there. And it's a byproduct that could only be found today in ovens that are melting something at 3,000 degrees Celsius. We weren't supposed to have this 10,000 years ago, but there it is. What's also important is cadmium. That's used in batteries. Ruthenium and rhodium are used in electrolytes and solar cells. And all of those IUMs, bar platinum, have been discovered since 1804. Now, my question is, what are all those metals doing inside this ring? Its major component we don't even recognise. So that is another object that gives us the same thing that we found at Carillon. Now, this is found in Angkor Wat, which we believe is the far edge of what used to be Lemuria. Okay, and we believe this has come out of Lemurian culture when technology was at a highest level. And we also know for a fact that original people had technology here until around the time that Atlantis blew up, which we think happened around 12,000 years ago, and walked away from it. So all our rocks that we've got come from that earlier time again. So what I'm showing you at the moment, and we have more, but I don't want to bring them all out. I showed you a piece of metal that was found in Gosford to make sure you understand it's found in Australia, and we've got lots of other rings that have been found in Australia. And by the way, the story is that 60,000 or 50,000 years ago, Homo sapiens came to Australia, and to a Cook, that was it. No one in, no one out. No metal, no nothing. Well, what's all this stuff doing here? We've got plenty more. Two more rings that were both found at Hill End. And there's a lot of stuff around here. But the most important point, ladies and gentlemen, you put the skull, you put that other piece of metal I've got, plus that ring we've got there, and you ask yourself, where did it come from? And the same answer each time. I can tell you where it didn't come from. Here. Those beams did not come from here. The metal is in that first thing I showed you, and the metal is in this weird thing here. For people with 5 fingers that can put it inside there, did not come from here. There's been stuff that's been put in here that came from somewhere else. So when we talk about empirical evidence, we have a lot more. We've got how many from things from Lemuria? About 8?
Yeah.
And we've got 4 from Atlantis. And I know that sounds quite bizarre, but I can tell you we've had these rings analysed from Atlantis, and they have within them orichalcum. Now, orichalcum is according to Wikipedia, the mythical metal that was found in the mythical continent of Atlantis. Now, orichalcum, Plato, Pliny the Elder, and Homer all spoke about the components of orichalcum. This ring I'm holding up here is pure orichalcum. This comes from Angkor Wat too, and this is an amazing ring with 6 animals across there on top of it, and this is pure orichalcum. That is part of that Atlantis Lemuria story. So those things have been, and by the way, 2 of the Atlantean rings were found at Hill End, which is a gold field in New South Wales that sits on the 33-degree latitude, which is an interesting story about 33 degrees. So, and Evans just put up the picture of the 3 Atlantis rings. So what we're getting in this country of Australia is chemistry that doesn't come out of a stick, stone, bone toolkit. We have skulls that do not come out of Homo sapiens, and they're all in this country. And like you said when you spoke to an elder in West Australia, all the old white elders, always there's a saying, as on top, so below. But notice it's not so below, as on top. As on top comes first. That's an original saying I'm pretty sure you may have heard, and if you haven't, believe me, they all say it. It's never so below, as on top. It's as on top, so below. My elder told me, Kano told me, if you go to a site where they do not point up there to a constellation, planet or star, it's not a sacred site. It has to have a connection with up there. So it tells us something about the original people. They have kept our ancestry and the truth of our ancestry alive continually. Then when the white fellas came here, they dismissed everything they did and Maiden said this is all wrong and gave us a different story about us dribbling and then coming out of a cave one day and having a monkey daddy and a monkey mummy. I'm sorry. And there's one last thing we need to think of, Isha. I want you to think about this. If I was to ask you to describe what an orangutan or a chimpanzee or a zebra looks like, if you gave me a picture of one of those, that would suit for all, wouldn't it? Okay? Because they all look roughly the same, don't they? In fact, every animal on this planet, bar one, all looks the same. Now, remember, we were told we come from a monkey daddy and mummy. If that's the case and they all look the same, why are there 7 billion faces right now and none of them look the same? Why is it we can weigh 40 kilos or 400 kilos? Why is it we can run at 2 k's an hour or 35 k's an hour? Why is it we can be half a metre tall or 2.5 metres tall? Is there any other animal that does that? The answer is no. Well, how can that be? Simple. There's part of your ancestry. You put that face with a Homo sapien face, and guess what? You mix the two together, you can get anything. And that's why we are the only animal on this planet that doesn't fit into the pattern that nature gave for all terrestrial beings. They all look roughly the same. All chimps look roughly the same. They are the same height, the same weight. They move at the same speed. We don't. There's nothing about us that's similar. There are 7 billion people on this planet and no two look the same. You've got to understand the reason is we didn't come from a monkey daddy and a monkey mummy. We came from up there and down here. As on top, so below. That's the story for everything. And what we've just shown you now, very quickly in the time we had, and that took up most of the time, is a very quick empirical overview of some of the evidence that we have that shows you that we don't just come from here. We are not from the Earth. We're galactic citizens, and we've forgotten it.
That's incredible. And I have to just sink my teeth in with the few minutes that we have left into some sciencey part of this. So I have a scientific background. Before I was teaching people about galactic contact, I actually so I kind of understand, the periodic table and physics, and I've kind of done all that. So when you say to me you have a substance that has a percentage that is unknown, now we know that everything on this planet is made up of electrons, protons, and neutrons, and the composition of that is what determines, for example, hydrogen is 1 and 1, oxygen, so on and so forth. So is it possible to do that molecular analysis to find out, even in an unknown substance, what its particles are made of, how many protons there are, how many neutrons there are? Because I think that, if that substance was something that doesn't exist on our periodic table, you're looking at some pretty hard evidence there.
You could, and you probably would be able to do that, but you've got to remember that the technology we've used was a chemical analysis done through scraping a piece of the rock there. They didn't have the machinery for that, and a machine that basically analyzes any form of metal or anything that turns up there. The problem is, for that to happen, I have to have the cooperation of the scientific community. And I can tell you, that's not going to happen. That's the problem we've got. And that is why I'm not allowed, by law, by the way, it's been written to me and stipulated, I am not allowed to have the bones analysed, which they could. We do mitochondrial DNA study. We will be able to analyse those bones straight away. I mean, I've got a bone here, which I know came from an Egyptian prince, Nefertari. I'm not allowed to have it analysed. The government has made it clear that no university or scientific institution, bar the guy I play tennis with, because he doesn't care, and he actually rents his laboratory out at the university and pays them $3 million rent. So they love having him there, but he's not working for the Department of Education or the government. I need people like that, and there's very few of them around. And we've used those people constantly. But yes, you're right. We could prove conclusively that it's not from this planet and it's a brand new substance. And like they said, with that, if they could analyse that 24% and break down the molecular breakdown of that, they could synthetically create that and make something massive that would make every metal so much stronger. Titanium is a metal hardener, as you know, so is chromium. And by the way, some of the rings from here have titanium in them. Now think about that. Titanium was first used in 1932 to harden 24 karat gold. We've got rings here with titanium inside them that are thousands of years old. All that stuff is there. They know it's there, but they won't analyze it because basically we have to rewrite our history of the past. We have to rewrite our history of the past and probably rewrite our future if we knew this is proof they were here. You're right, it could be proven, but you've got to remember every level of government and every university in Australia knows who we are, and none of them will have anything to do with us. So, yeah, we have the technology. We could analyse that. We certainly could. And I'd be up for it. I'm very up for it. I've been doing science all the way through. And that's why we get attacked so much, because we're not using channeling. We're not using visions. We're going to laboratories. We're going to machines to get the answer. So, yeah, you're right. We could do it, but they won't let us. That simple.
I have to ask as well, so I'm in contact with the Galactic Federation all the time,
Huh?
So one of the things that sort of comes through from their end is that there is a reason why humans can't know this technology at this time. And one of those reasons is that we aren't sure enough to know that. And so, yes, it's frustrating that all these roadblocks are in place, but I also do really trust in the divine plan, and I believe the galactics have a plan. And so I wonder if there's that element playing into it as well, that in the right timing, when humanity's ready, the access to this technology will be given to us. And I think it's fair to say that, the same way I wouldn't hand a machete to a 2-year-old, I wouldn't want humans or governments at this time to have certain technology. So maybe there's some sensibility behind it.
There is. And you've got to remember, when I hold up this stuff that comes from Atlantis and the rings, and by the way, some of the rings from Atlantis, it's not the only one that has parts that aren't analysed, that don't add up. They did live with us then. And they came here assuming they knew this planet was going to ascend. And you know that happened about 3.5 years ago. They knew that was going to take place, but they didn't have a timeline. And they actually thought that Atlantis was where humans were now evolving and ready to become part of the galactic arrangement. And then they found out, primarily through the rings, which we can't talk about today because the rings destroyed Atlantis. They gave us that technology and we misused it.
Yeah.
And we misused it badly. And that is why a decision was made that past that point, they would never come back and directly assist us until we deserved it. Because they made the mistake of living with us and thinking, yeah, Atlantis, they're there. This is it. This is heaven on earth. This is what we came for. But the timing was wrong. And yes, we've been told the same thing. When this planet ascends and is completely ascending, and those humans that stay behind that are able to stay here, and there's not a lot of them, when that happens, they will come back down and they will assist us and give us more of this information they have at the moment. Mesref, but I did ask a question of Mesref, who was Leah's off-world contact once, and said, why don't you come down now? Because we're in a dreadful state of affairs.
We need some help.
We need some help. And he said, we would never break into the bedroom of a child when they're holding a gun. They have to put the gun down first before we can walk into their bedroom. And at the moment, you're still holding a gun. They don't trust us at the moment for the best of reasons, because we don't deserve that trust. And until the planet, which is now ascending, as you know, and each person's got to make a decision where they're going to be, when that's finished, they know that is the time. They will come down then and share. But in the meantime, we have to earn the right for them to come. We have to convince them we're worthy of the knowledge and wisdom they have. And at the moment, we're not. It's that simple. And if you look around outside and look at the leaders we've got today that are running the place, I couldn't convince any alien to come here right now and say we're doing it right. We're not. So we have to wait for that change that's began to complete itself. Then they will come, but not before.
Do you think they are? I mean, as a blanket rule, I would agree with that. But there are a lot of people having individual contacts. I mean, myself, and a lot of people that I know as well. I think on the one hand, there's the, you know, a global effect of that, but I think individually there's still choices that we can make so that little bits of that can start trickling too. At least that's been my
Yeah.
I mean,
But you are. But here's the point with that. They're clever with that because what they're doing, like Leah and I have written the first book, we're doing a second book, and all the stuff Mesra just said is in there. But the point of this is someone can read this and say, you guys made it up. What they're not now doing is they're trying to give you the answer and they're using you. And the people say you're crazy. Don't worry about that. They will. But what you get the choice is you get the choice to say whether I want to believe it or not. And if you say I don't believe it, fine. That's your decision. That's part of your decision. Everyone's got to make a decision. Yes, they are in contact with different beings, with children and with older people, and they're giving messages through there. But for every person who believes what you say is correct, there will be 10 who think you're an idiot. But that's the decision now, you see, and that's what they want to do. They want to use humans to get that message out. And Leah and I have written a large book that Mesref is trying to give and basically telling you how to live in this change that's taking place. But you can say, we made it up and I want empirical proof. Well, what they're not going to do is land a massive spaceship on the lawn of the White House or Parliament House. They're not going to do that because everyone will then say, oh, yeah, I get it now. I want to be part of what the hippies were saying. No, you have to earn it. So they're not going to directly come and show us anything. We have to make the leap of faith. Now, if people don't want to believe what you've said, you've heard from those people, that's their decision. Okay, and if they do, then they make a leap of faith because you can't prove empirically that you're in contact with those aliens the same way Leah can't, right? They can listen to the words you've said and say, does it make sense? Does that ring with me? But most of them won't even do that, but that's their decision. And their decision will have consequences.
do you think that's the free will element of this? Because what I've been told is
Yeah.
that there's they can assist, but they can't intervene. And by landing the spaceship in the White House, that's an intervention.
That's intervention.
That's
And you
not
get
giving
people
up
who
the
say,
will.
I want to join up now. And the whole of my life, I thought you were all shit and I didn't believe in any of it. But now that I've seen something in front of my face, that's good enough. They don't want that sort of person. They want the person who's prepared to take a leap of faith and believe something they can't empirically prove. That's what the deal is. So if people decide that what you're saying and what Leah's saying is rubbish, that's their decision. But Mesref has made this very clear. This is the only time when the decisions people make will have immediate consequences. And what it comes down to is if you don't lock yourself into the planet and the way it's ascending and become part of that, when you finish your life this time round, you will not be incarnating back here because if your soul came back, this planet will be reverberating at such a high level, it would kill you. You will not be able to cope. And that is why we're going through this period now when the Schumann resonance goes to a massive levels for a day and a half, drops back, goes up and drops back. The Schumann resonance is now functioning much harder than it ever did before, but it pauses. It's not continual. There'll be a day in the future when it will sit in the thousands and never drop back. And what they're trying to do right now is trying to get humans ready for this. Because to be honest, if it happened when it was supposed to happen basically by now. The change would have happened by now, but they worked out there's not enough humans ready to be part of this change, and they've put it back. And we won't talk about that today, but that's another part of it. There's a lot of people running around saying the change is coming tomorrow. It's not. It's not coming tomorrow. It's not coming next year. It's not coming next decade. It's decades away. It's up to us how close it's going to be.
We can influence that, make it bring that quicker.
Yeah.
Well,
But
I've heard from the Federation it can be as soon as 2027 if we get our act together. So,
No.
like
Not more.
by
No,
2027.
there's been discussions that have been taken place at the highest level, and the chances of it happening then are incredibly remote. I'm going to be honest about that. I don't think that's possible then. And the reason was given was this: if the change took place now, there would be maybe 2,000 people on the whole of this planet that would be ready. And they said, you won't be spiritual beings. You'll just be trying to stay alive from day to day and keep yourself going. There'll be no one sitting around to meditate. They'll be just trying to stay alive. They don't want that. They want us so we live in comfort, and we don't have enough people to maintain the systems we have at the moment. And that's why it's been put back. You see, over the last 3 or 4 years, we've been put in a constant state of fear deliberately. They're trying to block this. They're doing it deliberately, whether it's warfare. We were told about the threat of world war. We were told about the threat of pandemics. We were talking about this 8 years ago. We were told then when this change comes, they would do all those things, and they have, with more to come. And they'll keep doing it because while people are fearful, they will not evolve. So no, it's not going to happen. It could be 2 decades if we're lucky. That's our understanding. But we have to be there. We have to earn it. And there's not enough yet. There aren't enough. And a lot of people who will call themselves New Age and aware, they're not. They're not. Their egos are speaking way too loud at the moment, and they can't hear what they're really supposed to hear. It's not like that. There aren't enough people. Right now, I'll tell you now, if there was a change, I wouldn't be here. I'm not ready. And I've been told that, haven't I? By them. You're nowhere near ready, man. You're the first one off. I'll be going with Gates. I'll be just behind him. We've got to understand. Mesmer has made it really clear about how we're supposed to behave. And I look at that and think, no, I haven't got that one. No, I haven't got that one either. We are all there to do ourselves. And what people also would need to understand is no leader coming up for this. There's nobody in the sky. It's each individual person has got to make their own change. And if they can't, that's bet on their soul. That's how it's going to be.
I think there's hope, though. I mean, I know the date has been pushed back. It was 2012 and 2020, and now there's a different unfolding that's taking place. Yes, we've struggled through this, but do you think there's hope at the end of this all?
Absolutely. They've made it clear that ceremonial Uluru has started the process and it cannot be stopped. What it can be is delayed.
Right.
And there was a discussion that took place about 6-8 months ago about whether it was going to be 3 years or much further, because during that discussion, until after a decision was made, they never told us why, did they? After the decision was made, they said, well, we're glad you made that decision was made that way because you're not ready. But yes, what it means is I was told, made it very clear, when the change happens, you'll be there. Well, no, Evan. I'm not even going to be there when it happens. I was told that. I mean, the good news, if I die tomorrow, that means it could happen straight after that, but I'm not really keen on that at the moment. So, yes, I think we should be incredibly excited about this because here's the point. Okay, let's say it's 30 years away, and I'm guessing it's going to be around about that, and I've got an artefact that proves it, but I'm not going to do that today. Well, I'll come back. Okay, I've already been told I'm coming back again, so I'm going to be part of it. And what you've got to realise, okay, if it doesn't happen while you're here, if you're really fighting for this and you believe in it, you'll come back. You'll be part of it. Your soul will come back. It's no big deal. Just keep doing it. What we've got to try and do in the meantime is get the numbers up, because once the numbers are right, that's the day it's going to happen now. And when it was nearly set into stone, it was going to be 3 years after. And I remember we spoke about that and said it would be that. And then we're told, no, it's just not ready. So, yeah, I would be incredibly excited by this, but just don't expect it to happen tomorrow, because a lot of people are talking like that. And what worries me, if you talk like that long enough and it doesn't happen tomorrow, you think, oh, well, it's never going to happen. We don't want that. We want them to understand it is going to happen. And as you know, we've got lots and lots of proof, and we're going to show that at Uluru, and we do a talk there. We're going to do it at Bundaberg. We're going to show people proof that that ceremony actually is real. And once you believe in that ceremony being real, then, well, you're lucky. You were there. You were part of the ceremony we did. And for the people who are there, I've never had to convince any of them of what took place, because you were part of it. And you know full well.
I mean, yeah, I haven't spoken much about what happened at Uluru since it happened, because it was just so much. And I was actually, I mean, you guys, we interacted a little bit. You were doing the thing at the park, and then I was actually with the other people, like facing the rock, doing the ceremony with the Indigenous people. And it was, I can't even have the words to.
That's the point, you see. But it was the proof. You see, that's the real proof you've got, because there are no words for this, because it's beyond, and I can't really explain it either. I mean, we've got film at 7:36, and it was done by someone who gave us this film of the rock where there's this massive sheet of white that covers the whole of the sky. It's a flash.
Yeah,
It doesn't touch the rock, because that's when the rock was turned on. The magic box, the elders called it the magic box because it's a word we can relate to. It turned on at that moment. From the time it went on at 7:36, that's it. That is our future is now locked into. The only thing that you can't do with this sort of stuff is give timelines. Are the worst part of, as you know, any sort of prophecy. Timelines are dangerous, and that's what we're trying to calm down. But yes, we've got the proof, and we'll show people the proof, both at Uluru and at Bundaberg. We'll show people absolute proof of that rock being turned on. We've got another film of that UFO that just hovers around there at about 20 k's an hour. We've got so much proof. We've got the proof of the prophecy that the Hopis gave about the two brothers, the Kachunas, of the two blue skies, one at Uluru and one at Atlanta, Georgia. We've got a picture of the red eye hovering in Russia, wasn't it? Spain. All the prophecies the Hopis give have come to fruition about the blue Kachunas coming and the change coming. And they speak about exactly the same thing. Proven. That we can prove. When it happens is entirely up to us. We are in control of our destiny. And at the moment, we're not ready. So our job, your job, and the job of everyone that went to that ceremony and those who believe in it is to let people know it's real. And once they know it's real and they can see it's real, and we've got that proof, we've got plenty of pictures and videos to prove to people it happened, it all becomes easier. Life becomes much more enjoyable. I mean, I look at the mess today and I think, whatever, I'm not going to get involved anymore. What all the stupid people do, I don't have any reaction anymore because I know this planet's going to get better. And I just look at the people who do these stupid things and say, well, I don't know where you're going next, but I know where you're not coming next. You've just got a ticket to ride anywhere but here. And that's what this is about.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here today. I think it's been a very conversation. And to anyone who's listening out there today, leave your comments. Let us know what you think. And yeah, I think one thing I want to share just before we jump off is anyone listening to this, just have that hope that every moment, every action is making a difference. Some days wake up and think, oh, it hasn't happened yet. It hasn't happened yet. But that's okay, because in this present moment, you can still choose your state of being. And I think that's the biggest contributor to this new world that we're creating together.
That's it. You got it. Exactly. Beautiful way to finish that. Thank you so much.